Yo, sports fans, armchair GMs, couch coordinators, what is up? It's the Sportsman Land. I'm back with another episode of the LANDO show. Episode, what are we at? 16. Episode 16, man. That is crazy to think about. I know it's like not even really a milestone number, but it's just crazy to think, like looking back at all the, just like flipping back through my notes here, just seeing everything that we've talked about, everything that I've written down. It's pretty cool. It's cool to track your progress, to kind of go back and look, seeing your tendencies and stuff, just based on kind of where you started and, as compared to where you are now. Just kind of seeing that progress is cool. First off, I wanted to, let me hit over today's topics real quick. I'll kind of talk about that real quick. We got some high school football we're gonna hit on very briefly. We've got the coaching carousel per se at Texas, just as we kind of take a broad view, bird's eye view, I guess, scope of Steve Sarkisian's staff and what that's going to look like at Texas as he's kind of finishing that up. I got some, obviously, of course, about this channel is going to heavily feature obviously the Texas Longhorns program as well as the Dallas Cowboys organization as well. So we're going to hit on a couple quick things there before we dive into the divisional round matchups in the NFL playoffs. So, but back to where I was headed before that. The first thing I wanted to do today was talk about something that I thought about yesterday while listening to Sands' podcast. He was on episode 35, which is also crazy to see his journey as well and follow his progress. It seems like he does seriously get better every single time. He's a very, obviously very knowledgeable sports guy, first and foremost there, but he's an underrated entertainer. I think that is the thing that like comes most natural to him. Is just like that's the thing that I honestly respect the most about him is just his willingness to say, or really his unwillingness to care about what other people think. Like he kind of just, he states his 2 cents and his honestly just his mind. And he does so freely, and I respect the heck out of it. And he's just so entertaining because of that. He is who he is, and he doesn't shy away from his own personality. You can really just feel like Sands when you're hanging out with him, like just sitting on a couch in a living room somewhere watching a football game or a basketball game. That is the Sands that you see and hear on his podcast too. So mad props to him for that. Just kind of staying true to himself. I really respect it, and I honestly, I think he's kind of trying to stay towards the Monday, Thursday model of dropping his podcast twice a week. And whenever I get that notification from him, sending it to Chris and I and Taji and DJ and Haas and Tanner in our group chat, it's like it just honestly makes my day because I know that I'm going to be entertained, I'm going to laugh, but I'm also going to learn some pretty cool things about sports, like, particularly from the basketball side of things that I wouldn't otherwise know. But one of the things he was talking about was just how he prided himself a little bit in being an influencer, but not to the way that we hear that term thrown out today, like with people influencing on social media or whatever. While that is, somewhat true that he has kind of done that in that regard, he was more so kind of focusing on just the way that basically what he has done in starting his podcast, how it's kind of motivated, myself and our, other peers and friends within our group to kind of take that next step, take that leap of faith and, really just start their own stuff, their own podcast or their own blog or their own YouTube channel or whatever. In Taji's case, his stream, right? So it's like his Twitch stream. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge, like, he was talking about how maybe people hadn't recognized or acknowledged yet that he was sort of at the forefront of that, at least from our friend perspective. But I did want to just kind of give him credit there. I do think it's important to say that, like, if his podcast doesn't exist, then my YouTube channel likely doesn't either. Like it was always something that I kind of thought about doing, something that I knew that I loved, something that I had experience with in the past, like with calling our games at Wichita State, some of our home games as a color commentator. Just that's what we do. Like, we talk about sports. I talk about sports. That's what I love. It's my passion, and studying it and figuring out tendencies and just learning how the game is evolving, that type of thing, right? So I've always known that that's kind of like where I would be in my life in one form or fashion or another, but never really knew for sure that I would be here sitting, talking to you guys with a YouTube channel and just having something to do to put out just, for content consumers like, you guys who are watching this channel right now. So, I just wanted to say thank you to Sands, I guess. I think I might have said it in one of my very, very first videos, even before I made the channel, when I was still just kind of posting on Facebook, just how I respected him for kind of being at, just taking that step, taking the leap, starting his own podcast, and now he's just running with it with flying colors. So, Sands, thank you, man. If you're listening, I'm sure you probably are at some point. I appreciate you. So just wanted to get that out there and acknowledge. But first thing we're going to dive into is what is being dubbed as the Dodge Bowl. Many of you may know, some of you guys may not know. I want to actually call it the Lake Bowl because we've got in the Division 6A state title game on Saturday night at AT&T Stadium. We've got South Lake Carroll versus Austin Westlake. And why is that significant to me? Well, first of all, I love high school football. I love the recruiting aspect of everything that goes into just the high school realm of football, of sports there, and just kind of following players as they progress and seeing where they end up and how their success from high school translates at the college level, all that stuff, right? Well, in this case, we have head coach Todd Dodge from Austin Westlake versus his son, head coach Riley Dodge from South Lake Carroll. And to me, that's just a fascinating talking point. I know it's made high school football, at least in the state of Texas, headline news, all across, the DFW, Metroplex, given that that's where South Lake's located, and as well as the greater Austin, Houston, San Antonio area, just because that's, kind of Westlake's forte down there, down south. So just kind of wanted to hit on a couple things, really. It's like, obviously, you've got the two Dodges head coaching against each other. And those two, by the way, won a state title together when Todd was Riley's head coach, and Riley was the quarterback at South Lake in 2007, I believe, before he started his college career, his college playing career there. I think it was at North Texas was where he went first. I could be wrong, and then I think he played at McNeese State after that. Not totally sure, but anyways, 2021. A lot of people don't know that to start the season, Austin Westlake and South Lake Carroll were supposed to be the headliner, the opening day matchup, and the season opener against each other. That was supposed to happen at the first game of the year. Well, obviously the COVID protocols changed that, and ironically enough, here we are, last game of the season, the state title game, the pinnacle of high school football. These two are matching up not in the first game of the season, but in the last game of the season. So, unfortunately, one of those guys does have to lose, but I'm just fascinated by the matchup. Mostly, we talked about the recruiting aspect of it, right? Quinn Ewers, 5-star quarterback, number 1 overall prospect in the 2021 class, the, I believe, 5th or 6th highest rated prospect ever in the history of high school sports, high school recruiting, football. And then you've got Cade Klubnik on the other side, who is also in the 2021 quarterback class. And he's a four-star prospect that, is also generating lots of interest around the country from, just about every Power 5 school that there is. So, just the history and tradition of both of those programs. Obviously, we all know all the quarterbacks that come from Austin Westlake, particularly most recently Sam Ellinger. And then you've got, Drew Brees, you've got Nick Foles, guys like that. And then just everything we know about South Lake Carroll, just the powerhouse that they are. That type of stuff I just love. I love seeing how, programs can maintain success and just be so dominant for so long and just kind of carry that over. And so I just think it's going to be fascinating to watch on Saturday night, those two schools. And another thing, I was just kind of going back and looking, we're hearing about Westlake's defense and how good and dominant they are. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. How good can they really be? Well, just recently I went back to just kind of fact check and, do a little bit deeper of a dive into that, and come to find out they've only allowed, before last week's game, they had allowed 14 points. That was their season high of points allowed in just in any game all season. And last week they gave up 21, and that was to the reigning Division I 6A state title or state champs in North Shore, who is also headlined by a 4-star quarterback that's committed to Auburn and Demetrius Davis. And so just thinking about, like, a lot of people pretty much dubbed North Shore to be the favorite. Like, you know, going into last week's game, Westlake versus North Shore and Southlake versus Duncanville. Duncanville had Southlake's number each of the last 2 years when they played, and they kind of, you know, they beat them pretty good. And so a lot of people expected it to be North Shore and Duncanville in the state title game. Well, that's, you know, both of those two schools flipped the script, the two Lakes, the two Dodges, right? They flipped that script. And now, to me, it's just crazy. Like, I don't know if y'all follow high school sports a lot, but defense is not something that kind of comes very easily. And gotta love telemarketers. Nobody wants to talk to Spectrum. So defense, it's like, it's much, much tougher at the high school level for various reasons. We're not going to dive deep into that, but high scoring affairs are not uncommon. And for a team to hold everybody except the reigning state champ under 14 points throughout the entirety, like the entire course of a season, I think that's you know, a fascinating talking point. And just I don't know why I haven't really dug deep into the ins and outs, the X's and O's of that defense and what they do differently. But to see them match up against one of the best and most talented and, you know, highly touted prospects in Quinn Ewers of all time in high school football, that is just really cool to watch. So aside from just the two head coaches, obviously same last name, grew up together, all the history, right? Father son, coaching matchup. That to me is the most intriguing part about the whole thing. Is Can Westlake's defense maintain that same level of dominance against the best, you know, quarterback in the country, basically? So can't wait to see how that one plays out Saturday night. And then the next thing that I wanted to kind of hit on, you know, one other basically cool high school football nugget is everybody watching this channel likely watched the high school, the national championship game, right? Alabama versus Ohio State. One sec, gotta hydrate. Sorry about that. I just go off on these tangents, and next thing I know, I can't even hardly talk because my throat is so dry. Anyways, Armani Winfield, who is a 4-star receiver prospect in the upcoming class out of Louisville, Texas, the 2021 graduating class, senior this year. He committed at halftime of the national championship game. And what we learned is that basically he called up Coach Texas's wide receiver coach, Andre Coleman, at halftime and pretty much said, "Hey, Coach, I've seen enough of Steve Sarkisian's offense and what he does, getting, you know, basically the ball into the hands of his playmakers in space." And you know, he's like, "I'm ready." So he did an interview with I think it was Jeff Howe, Horns 247, and basically, you know, he talked about how he was already kind of committed or willing to commit or close to committing last year under Tom Herman, but he was just, you know, he had that question mark of, you know, where's Tom going to be, the uncertainty of the coaching position there, right? So it's not to say that Steve Sarkisian just really swayed him that much in that game per se, but to me, so like he was already obviously heavily considering Texas. He's stated that he wants to stay close to home, but the reason why I just think it's so important to think about is, you know, they kind of went to that power zone read with Sam Ehlinger, and it was kind of deterring, like over the last 3 years, it was kind of deterring these big time receiver prospects to come to Texas, just knowing that the propensity that they had to sort of rely on Sam in the running game more so than they had to with his arm, just because of some of the deficiencies there that we've talked about. Well, to me, it was just cool to see that a player as good as Armani Winfield is, and as highly touted as he is too at the receiver position, getting a skill guy like that who was 99+% committed, like crystal ball, to Ohio State, to literally at halftime call up the wide receivers coach at Texas, Andre Coleman, and say, hey, look, everybody thinks I'm going to Ohio State. I want to let you guys know right now, I've seen enough. I want to come to Texas. I want to be in Austin. I want to stay close to home, and I want to be a part of what I'm seeing right now on national television. I want to help build that. So I just thought that was a really cool talking point, and why I think that I'm already starting to see the impact that Steve Sarkisian and his resume is going to have. His first year at USC, he actually had the number 2 overall recruiting class in the country. So we know what he can do as a recruiter. But then you talk about you bringing guys over like Jeff Banks, Kyle Flood, AJ Milwee, Pete Golding, who is still kind of a question mark, but all those guys, right, from Alabama to go along with Steve Sarkisian. And one of the things that, I kind of wanted to point out too is like Jeff Banks at first, my Longhorn group chat that I'm in with just a couple of buddies who are fans, obviously. And, they talked about Jeff Banks coming over, and they're like, yeah, he's going to coach tight ends. Well, and like immediately I knew, just based on his price tag, it was reported that Jeff Banks was going to be paid over $1 million per year. And I think it goes up by like, a tenth, like $100,000 basically with each successive season. So starting off this year, he's going to make right at $1 million, which makes him already the highest paid assistant in the country. But so to me, that didn't add up. I was like, there's no way the highest paid assistant in the country is going to be a tight ends coach. It just, it's more or less an irrelevant position now in college football, and not irrelevant, but you know what I mean. It's like it's not the OC, it's not the DC, it's not whatever, the head coach, right? So it's like, why is a tight ends coach going to be paid $1 million to come? There's no way that's accurate. So come to find out, I was right in that, that having that inkling of he's been named associate head coach, special teams coordinator, which is what he did at Alabama, tight ends coach, and, basically the lead recruiter. So knowing all that, seeing that basically reaffirmed that he was going to have a much, much larger influence and role within that coaching staff. It kind of, solidified my opinion there. To me, that hearing that Nick Saban was not only unwilling to let him go, but almost kind of pissed, like he understood the promotion that he was getting and the salary increase to go to Texas. That's obviously as a head coach, it's your job. You're kind of there to groom guys underneath you and send them about their way so that they can pursue their dream of being a head coach one day too. So it's like, it's just part of the process. It's understood, right? Nick Saban understood that, obviously, but to hear that he's not only was hesitant to let him go, but almost kind of pissed off about it, upset that he was leaving, that excites me a lot. And the reason why, most notably, aside from his influence and his ability as a coach on campus, he is what a lot of people are saying is, between a top 15 and a top 20 recruiter in the entire country. And you can go back and look at just all the names that are kind of attached to him, to his name specifically. And, it really tells you all you need to know. So Jeff Banks is the guy, aside from Steve Sarkisian, to me, he's the most important piece of this coaching puzzle, because what ultimately happens is, like, to me, Steve Sarkisian is, he's the head coach, right? But he's most specifically, and maybe most importantly, he is the play caller. That's why he's being brought in. They're bringing him in to install, first and foremost, his culture. Yes, right. That's the number one thing that you look for as a head coach. But he's being brought in to install the multifaceted, multidimensional read pass option offense that he utilized and has basically more or less made Alabama the best offense in the country the last 2 years. He's being brought in to do the same thing. He's in charge, first and foremost, of leading this offense and building a powerhouse, a dynamic offense similar to what we see with Alabama. So that's his goal. And so that's why all these assistants, why I said the first and foremost, when the news initially broke of Tom Herman's firing and Steve Sarkisian's hiring, I said, yes, I like it. It excites me. The potential is great. The ceiling is through the roof. But I wanted to see who he was bringing with him before I really got excited. Go back and listen to 3 videos ago. I said that, the guys that you're surrounding yourself with as a head coach are what make or break you. That's just the way that it is. And so, I was just pumped to see that who he could potentially bring, just obviously given his background with these blue blood powerhouse schools in USC and Alabama and, even Washington, say what you will about them. But he's got a great recruiting resume. And now, just as a national champion offensive coordinator, what more can you ask for? So, they bring in Kyle Flood, who is the O-line coach and now the associate offensive coordinator, which that to me is like saying Steve Sarkisian is play caller. Kyle Flood, you're basically in charge of overseeing the offense. Jeff Banks, you're pretty much more or less the head coach. Like, you are. Special teams is one of the 3 phases, right? But then you go and give them the associate head coach title and the tight ends coach title, as well as like lead recruiter. Jeff Banks, you are right up there next to Steve Sarkisian as big man on campus. Like, this is your program. So he is going to be basically responsible for taking all that pressure, all the coaching pressure off of Steve Sarkisian that Tom Herman was so loud about. That he said, with him being in charge of calling plays, he couldn't fulfill his duty as a head coach and, kind of be in multiple rooms at one time, more or less. Like, he was saying that it's just too much to do to oversee a program, build a culture, recruit, and be in charge and responsible for not only building and structuring an offense architecturally, but also being the head play caller on the sideline. There's only so many things you can do at one time on the sideline. And that's why having these guys that you trust, that are going to kind of hold you accountable in every aspect, that's so important. And so then the other guy too that we're needing to keep an eye on is obviously Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator from Alabama. So, we talk about Saban being upset about losing not only Sarkisian, but, Banks, Flood, all those guys, right? Well, Pete Golding, he's kind of the straw that may or may not break the camel's back in Saban's regard, just from like his coaching staff. And basically what we're hearing is him coming to Austin is essentially contingent upon Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator at Georgia, joining Saban and basically joining forces at Alabama, becoming Saban's new defensive coordinator, replacing Pete Golding. So remains to be seen what happens there. Obviously would love to keep Chris Ash, who pretty much transformed Texas's defense into a monster that I haven't seen in my time as, just my fandom and closely following that program. And, I think Texas at the last 6 to 7 games of the season was a top 5 defense in the country. So nothing more needs to be said about that. But to me, it just kind of feels like Chris Ash is going to join. I don't know. Maybe not. I think to me that it makes a lot of sense for him to basically rejoin the forces with Urban Meyer down in Jacksonville. I just kind of think like that makes a lot of sense to me. So we'll see if that happens or not. I would love to keep Chris Ash in Austin. Obviously, what is going on down here? All kinds of cords going everywhere. But ultimately, I think Chris Ash probably heads to Jacksonville to, I don't know, I would assume coach the defense, be in charge of the defense and, as the defensive coordinator there in Jacksonville under Urban Meyer. So we'll see what happens. But if not, obviously would love to have Pete Golding too, just come over and just bring that Alabama defensive, that physical culture and just kind of build on what Chris Ash was able to ignite this past year. So I think that's just about all I got. I think Tosh Lupoy now is weird too, because I talked about him initially along with Kyle Flood as 2 of the assistants to watch when Steve Sarkisian was hired. And obviously he's got the connection. It's weird too, because like the 2 teams that I follow closest, the Cowboys and the Longhorns there, he's got connections to both programs. So his connection with Dan Quinn, who is now the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys, obviously they spent time together in Atlanta when Quinn was still the head coach there. Tosh Lupoy was the defensive coordinator. Well, he also has connections to his name's going to slip my mind now. Texas's new defensive line coach that they're bringing over from the Lions, the Detroit Lions. They have connections as well. So it's like a lot of people basically are saying that it makes sense for him to go either way. So we'll see what happens there with Tosh Lupoy. But he's obviously a pretty well-respected recruiter across the country as well. And I think, what's funny is Tosh, so I guess he has connections there with Alabama as well, because he was there under Nick Saban before he went to Atlanta in 2018. And what's funny is the reason why I would say I prefer Pete Golding over Tosh Lupoy, as well respected as he is Saban basically encouraged, and this is also a talking point from Mike Roach on Horns 247. He said that he sort of more or less influenced Tosh to move on and to find a job elsewhere because of what he thought of Pete Golding. And he wanted to basically elevate Pete Golding from co-defensive coordinator under Tosh Lupoy to just the main guy, the head defensive coordinator, and encourage Tosh to move on because of that. So Pete Golding's a name to watch. We're still not sure what happens there. Like I said, contingent upon what happens with Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator at Georgia. I think that's Saban's top choice right now to replace him if he were to leave. So we'll see. But all in all, just excited from a recruiting perspective, from an offensive scheme perspective, just kind of simplifying things in a way, but just, we're seeing the power of the RPO and what that can do if it's utilized and taught properly with, the type of athletes, the caliber of players that Texas will have available, that Steve Sarkisian, Jeff Banks, and their staff will have, at their disposal. Texas is, it's time for them to wake up. I mean, college football's Death Star. Really, I mean, it's a sleeping giant down there in Austin, and at some point you think it's got to wake up. It's got to turn around, and I feel like if you can't do it now with this coaching staff, this new regime, then it may not ever happen again. So. It's time. The fans are ready, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Talked about Dan Quinn. So moving over to the Cowboys side, here's the thing. Short and sweet, guys. He doesn't have to be special. He doesn't. A lot of people are saying, there's if you're saying definitively, for sure he's the dude. He's the guy for the job. Or if you're saying definitively that he's not, I think either way you're wrong. All you have to do is just kind of hope for, okay, decent reputation as a defensive coordinator, right? Not a very great reputation as a head coach, though he did coach in the Super Bowl. So kind of give and takes there, right? What he did as a defensive coordinator in Seattle with, the Legion of Boom, there were Hall of Famers on all three levels. So, okay, so maybe, hold your breath there, kind of just slow your roll there, saying, oh, well, what he did in Seattle, that's what he's going to do in Dallas. No, it's not, because I'll tell you right now, the talent, and you guys all know this, 31st ranked defense in the league last year, total defense allowed, or just total defense, 31st in the league. There aren't Hall of Famers at every level on this Cowboys roster defensively. They're just not. Okay, so he's going to have to build, the Cowboys aren't a team with the high propensity to build via free agency. We know that as well, and especially with the salary cap decreasing and a relatively large contract looming with the quarterback situation. They're not going to be spendy this year in free agency either, so don't expect that to change. But just a change in philosophy, going back to more of a 4-3, cover 3 style of defense, like what they had under Rod Marinelli and Chris Richard. They were fine. They were, middle of the road, middle tier defense in the league. And that's all you have to do. That's all that this team under Dan Quinn has to be. They don't have to be world beaters. They don't have to be a top 5 defense in the National Football League to win games. This offense is going to score points. They're dynamic, right? We know what this team's capable of doing. We just need some sort of competence on the other side of the football for this hire to be a good one, a home run hire, right? we're not asking Dan Quinn to make us the best defense in the league. We're not asking Dan Quinn to build a Legion of Boom again in 1 year. We're asking Dan Quinn to just come in, say, okay, what do these guys do well? What were they doing before we tried to get crazy and cute and change things up in the weirdest year in NFL history? Let's go back to that. Let's do what we do best. Let's simplify the game and let's just be a middle of the road defense and let our offense kind of carry us. That's all we need. So again, anybody saying definitively for or against Dan Quinn, let's just wait. Let's just wait and see. Let's let him do his thing, and ultimately get a few guys in the draft, and let's build. Let's add another DB, add another a corner, add a safety, add some interior D line help. But let's build through the draft, and let's get back to doing things the way that we were before the Mike Nolan era of this horrible Cowboys defense, okay? And so back to that, though. So, we're talking about adding defensive talent to this roster. We got more telemarketers here. It's crazy how many of those we get a day. So basically, if you study mock drafts and follow those closely, don't be surprised if and when, as bad as the defense is, as much as we probably should address that side of the ball in every round with every pick that we have. Again, best player available philosophy, right? Stick to that. That's what I want to see this team continue to do, this front office continue to do. Don't be surprised when sitting at 10 if the best player available to you is an offensive player. If you go back and look at Todd McShay's draft board, 9 out of the first 10 players, best, of the top, projected picks are offensive players. The only one is Micah Parsons, the linebacker from Penn State. That's the only guy on the defensive side of the ball that's, projected to go inside the top 10. So to me, and I've heard the guys on the fan say this too, but don't be surprised if it's an offensive player, and don't be upset either if that's the case. I think it's highly likely that not only do they address the offensive side of the ball just based on what's going to be there for them, I think it's highly likely that this team kind of looks at the offensive line again. And we have this idea that's kind of stuck in our heads as Cowboys fans of, oh, we're the best offensive line in football. 3 years ago, yeah, that was true, but that's old news now. Travis Frederick is retired, and we've got a banged up Tyron Smith that can't play a full 16. So if you're about to, if you're about to invest the amount of money that they're getting, that what I expect them to do in Dak Prescott, well, it also might be a good idea to invest up front in somebody who can protect him if Tyron Smith goes down. So Rashaan Slater is a guy that I've seen from the offensive tackle from Northwestern, who's kind of been mocked to the Cowboys there at 10, who's kind of a likely candidate. So I wouldn't hate that pick at all. I really wouldn't. And the Cowboys they've hit on. So they have we know what they're good at doing, and the track record of them not only taking, developing, and just kind of maintaining offensive linemen in the first round. There's a really, really good recent track record in history there. So that's something that they're good at. They're good at evaluating offensive line talent, and so I wouldn't hate that pick again if that's ultimately what happens to us at 10 there. But moving on from the Cowboys, I guess let's talk into the more relevant, more pertinent NFL teams right now in the divisional playoff round. What I think is honestly maybe the best weekend in all sports. A lot of people will say that it's March Madness. A lot of people will say, everybody has their own preference, right? NBA Finals weekend or week. That's a good one for me as well. But to me, the best weekend in all of sports is the College World Series is a great one too. But to me, it's the divisional playoff round in the NFL, and just because it's the 8 best teams in the league, and they're all playing in a 24-hour span, really. So every single one of these matchups here, starting with the Rams and Packers, I can see going kind of any direction. It's funny that I guess we have sort of this I don't know. Let's just break it down one at a time here. Try to go pretty quick because we're already moving pretty long here. But first game of the weekend, Rams at Packers tomorrow afternoon. To me, the talking point is Jared Goff's thumb, and him throwing a frozen football with that thumb. How comfortable is he going to be in Lambeau in freezing temperatures and potential snowy conditions? How good is that thumb going to feel? How well can he grip the ball? How confident is he going to be throwing it? That's the biggest thing to me. And then aside from that is you've got the number 1 defense in football versus the number 1 offense in football. And in the Super Bowl era, those teams have met 12 times in the playoffs. And historically speaking, the defense has had the better of the number 1 defense gets the better of the offense. 8 times out of 12, they're 8-4 in the Super Bowl era in the postseason when the number 1 D matches up with the number 1 offense. But I'll tell you what, one thing right now is to me that while that's a cute stat and all that I guarantee you none of those other 12 teams had a guy named Aaron Rodgers on it. And this is honestly the best version of Aaron Rodgers that I think I've seen in his career. And maybe that's because I've paid a little bit more attention just to his confidence and his charisma, just with him being featured every week on the Pat McAfee show, and just kind of learning a little bit more about what he prioritizes, what he sees, what he feels, all that stuff. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, like if you watch, this is the thing that it's, again, those intricacies that I'm enamored by. I just love so much. You watch Aaron Rodgers and watch the play clock. So this is to me why that, like, you get that number 1 defense, and against a guy like Aaron, it's neutralized, because what he does, he comes up to the line of scrimmage. They get the play call, the huddle, and it's very slow and it's very methodical. The Packers are, I think, like bottom 3 in the league in terms of plays per game. They don't run a lot of snaps, and that's because A-Rod basically. So also, if you're a betting man out there or woman, maybe take that into consideration, what I just said, and think about taking the under and hammering it in this game. Cold weather, slow and methodical offense on both sides, number 1 defense in the league, in the Rams, and a team like the Packers who are comfortable and capable of beating you playing slow. Well, again, so going back to it, what does A-Rod do? He's walking up to the line of scrimmage and he's studying. He's under center, he's in the gun, whatever. He's looking, surveying, just Devontae here. There's all these cues, right? I don't know what they're saying technically, but he's picking you apart before the ball is ever even snapped, and he's getting them into these positions and into the right play calls, the right protections, the right offense, telling his O-line slide left, hey, slide right. And obviously with David Bakhtiari being injured, that's a huge loss for them. The best tackle in football really this year. Tore his ACL in practice before week 17. So that's huge. But then you've also got Aaron Donald, who's kind of banged up too. He got injured in their wild card game last week. So I don't know how healthy he's going to be and how good he's going to be feeling. And, again, those cold conditions, it's not going to feel good to get hit every time, and slamming himself up against 2 and sometimes even 3 other 300-pounders at a time. But to me, just Aaron Rodgers' ability to not only read, but just completely dissect the defense before the ball's ever even snapped is the reason why I think the Packers are moving on. And ultimately, I don't know if the only team I see keeping them out of the Super Bowl is the Bucs. Still, I've maintained that, and I'm still gonna keep riding that. And we'll talk more about the Bucs and Saints at the very end. But yeah, I mean, I like the Packers in a low scoring game here, but I also like them to win pretty comfortably. I just think that at the quarterback position with Goff's thumb, that to me is the ultimate difference there. One sec. Moving on to the Ravens and Bills. Obviously in Buffalo, this game is again, maybe, I don't know if it's just the Ravens style of football that I love so much, just with what Lamar Jackson does as a runner. But this is probably the game I'm most looking forward to. I guess, I don't know, the Browns and Chiefs one is really exciting and intriguing to me too. But I love this game for a couple different reasons, mostly just because of the weather that we're expecting there is supposed to be obviously cold in Buffalo, but potentially some rain and snow in the forecast as well. So we'll see if that continues and if that is, kind of holds true. It's like the weather and what you think that, kind of the factor that it would have or the impact that it would have on a team that likes to throw the ball as compared to a team that pretty much solely relies upon the run game. So obviously, if it is pretty extreme weather conditions there, we'll see. But if it is, you'd think that would favor the Ravens run game, their power run scheme, a lot more than it favors Josh Allen dropping back and throwing the ball 45, 50 times a game, especially now that Zach Moss is done for the year. And, they basically got Devin Singletary in the backfield and nobody else who's seen relevant time. So, ultimately because of that, I don't know if I like the Bills moving on here. I love Josh Allen's game. I want, if I had to pick anybody to go win the Super Bowl this year, I would say I would prefer the Bills to do it, but I just don't know. I think the Ravens, I talked about last week how they're, pretty much the hottest team in football right now. And if they can just kind of get after Josh Allen a little bit defensively, they're like a top 8 blitz happy team in the NFL. And that's one thing, that's where Josh Allen does struggle. If you can get to him, when he's, every quarterback struggles more when they're pressured, obviously, right? But I think ultimately, if they're able to generate pressure the way that I expect them to, I think that it's going to be pretty difficult for the Bills to move the ball against this Ravens front. And I think that's ultimately the difference. So I kind of like them to move on there. Maybe we'll expect the Bills to kind of use that blitz happy Ravens D against them and kind of counter that with maybe some screen game, as an extension of the run game. I'm not exactly sure. Quick screens to John Brown and even Cole Beasley out there on the outside. And then even just kind of trying to, drop back, get those that front 7, those blitzers just, straight up field shooting their gaps and just kind of, let Josh Allen kind of slip one right behind him to Devin Singletary as he sneaks through past the line of scrimmage there. So it's maybe we'll see if that's how they try to counter that, especially given that, a team that already doesn't like to run the football in general, but 2, going against a team that doesn't really allow you to do it. To me, I don't know, if you're one-dimensional, it's tough to win football games in this league. And so I think that's why the Ravens move on. So we'll see what happens there. But now moving on to the Browns and the Chiefs. This is honestly, I changed my mind. This is the game I'm most looking forward to watching. And it's for this reason alone. It's nobody expects the Chiefs to win or expects the Browns to win this game. And ultimately, I don't either. But I think if there is any one team that can beat them, if there's one team that beats the Chiefs, it is the Browns. And it's because of that run game and what they like to do. But what ultimately scares me the most is this is something that I haven't heard anybody say. No one's talking about this. Teams that are off of so they have the first round bye locked up, therefore they sit their starters in week 17, and then they get the bye, the actual playoff bye in the first round of the playoffs. So the Chiefs are coming off of back-to-back weeks in which their starters haven't played. So that to me ultimately is as a Chiefs fan, that would scare the absolute crap out of me. Just knowing what this Browns team is coming off of, that emotional high, the confidence of just dismantling the Steelers the way that they did. And And, as a Chiefs fan, that would make me nervous. And especially given, you don't beat the Chiefs by just trying to go toe to toe with them and high octane, just dropping back and throwing the football, right? Like you beat the Chiefs by not playing their game. You beat them by grounding and pounding, running the football, and keeping the ball away from Patrick Mahomes, right? Obviously way easier said than done, but I expect the Browns to actually come out firing and literally maybe just guns blazing, catching the Chiefs off guard. This is all hypothetical, right? I don't know what's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me to see the Browns and Baker Mayfield come out slinging it and literally march up and down the field for the first quarter and a half, maybe even the first half. Like just kind of catching this Chiefs team off guard, maybe half asleep, whether that be from their, back-to-back bye weeks or just the fact that they don't expect them to come out throwing. The Chiefs can, the strength of their defense is the secondary. So again, it's kind of weird. It's like this weird catch-22 where, the Browns, you would think, would try to exploit the Chiefs on the ground. It's something that teams really haven't done because they're always playing from behind, playing catch up against Patrick Mahomes. But then, in the same token, it's like, well, the Chiefs are actually like, if there's one area of their defense that you do want to avoid, it's their secondary. So I don't know. I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out. But again, it's like the Chiefs are comfortable playing from behind. We saw that last year. They played all three of their playoff games. They were down by 10 or more points to start the game. So, ultimately, if there's any team in football that's built to come back from any deficit, it's obviously the Chiefs and Andy Reid. And, given what we know about Andy Reid's track record coming off a bye, like he's, pretty much unstoppable. He's unbeatable in those situations. So you've got, two things, again, working against each other, like a catch-22 counterbalance. There's so many different intriguing talking points in this game that fascinate me. But ultimately, when you see what happened to the Steelers last week, but also take into account the fact that as one-dimensional as they have been, a one-dimensional Ben Roethlisberger-led Steelers team was able to still throw for 500 yards in the air against the Browns. And now, again, obviously they had to do that. The Browns were more or less in a cover 3 sink for the entirety of the second half there with the lead that they had. They're just basically saying, all right, you take your 10 to 12 yards and we're just going to keep everything in front. We're not going to let anything beat us over top, right? Pretty wise thing to do there from a defense. So, they're not up there in man coverage and pressing and, trying to really keep the ball from getting the ball to his playmakers. They're kind of just letting them have it and taking everything underneath. And another thing too is Denzel Ward wasn't in that game. He's expected to be back for this week, so that's a huge bonus for the Browns secondary. But still, the fact that they were forced to be one-dimensional, they did have to throw the football as much. And having a guy like Myles Garrett, who's a pass rush specialist and makes his money getting after the quarterback, the fact Ben was able to still just throw for 500 yards pretty much at will against that secondary tells me that there, regardless of what you think about the back-to-back buys and the Chiefs maybe coming out sluggish, whatever, I don't know. I don't see. To me, it's their offense with Patrick Mahomes is just too much. And like I said, they're comfortable in those situations too, playing from behind. So Chiefs roll here, but again, don't be surprised if the Browns come out and make a lot of noise, at least in the first half, and kind of give Chiefs fans a little bit of a scare there. So either way, we'll be looking forward to seeing that one. I'm excited to watch that one too. And then the last game of the weekend, the night game, the nightcap on Sunday, Bucks at Saints. And again, heard Sands talking about this too. He's pretty much said that, and this is something I completely agree with. Do you really think somebody's going to beat Tom Brady 3 times in the same season? I mean, have you just think about that? Like, the reason, say what you want about his age and him falling off, not being the same quarterback as he was, all that nonsense, right? What makes quarterbacks good and what is the most unique part of that position is the mental aspect of the game that comes into play and how regardless of your physical ability, quarterbacks never, ever, ever stop improving mentally. And so ultimately, like again, what just goes back to what I was talking about with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Tom Brady is cerebrally, he is so far ahead of anybody else that has ever played that position that, to me, that's the difference. I don't care if the Saints beat the Bucs 38-3. I don't care if they, I think they won 24-20 or something like that in week 1. Like, this is not the same Bucs team that they saw in the first 2 times of the season. And now that Tom Brady has two whole games of film against you, that's scary. I mean, I would not want to be the Saints right now. I promise you that. And I guarantee you, like, the Saints didn't want the Rams to beat the Seahawks, because as crazy as it sounds, I think the Saints would have much rather been playing the Rams right now with their question marks at quarterback, and regardless of how good their defense is. If I'm the Saints, I'm dang sure wanting to play Jared Goff before I want to play Tom Brady. So, again, they're getting back into that play action passing game that I was so emphatically talking about, how they had to do that more. Just getting Tom back doing what he was doing in New England. Run the same offense. Don't get cute. And they're doing that now. They're running play action at a 28% clip over the last 4 games that they've played, the last 3 games of the regular season, and then their wild card game last week, and they're just clicking. That offense is dangerous, and then you get those linebackers, Levante David for the Bucs, and Devin White inside on turf where they're like those guys. That defense wants to come after you, and they want to play fast and moving side to side. You have to beat this team vertically, and the teams that can throw the ball down the field, the best are the teams that have the most success against this defense. But if you're trying to dink and dunk with Drew Brees' noodle arm, laterally, and just like using Alvin Kamara out of the backfield, kind of checking it down to him in the flat, and Michael Thomas, running 5-yard curls and, quick slants, these linebackers are going to pick you apart, and they are going to absolutely destroy you. And so we're just, I don't see the Saints being able to expand their repertoire offensively and challenge teams vertically. I don't see it. I don't like what I see from Drew Brees, and, just his history in the playoffs is I haven't always seen him rise to the occasion. So that's kind of where I hesitate to even consider the Saints to win here. But ultimately, I'm pretty dang confident that the Bucs move on, and maybe more so than any other game here on this weekend slate, for all the reasons that I said. But also just because I want to prove a point. I had 2 people tell me last week that Drew Brees right now is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you think that, how you generate that opinion. I don't know if they were trolling me. They may have been. I honestly don't know. But to me, I think we're going to find out how untrue that statement is this weekend, and I like the Bucs to roll. So that's all I got, guys. Another long edition here. I'm going to probably start doing some more quick hitters so I can break up like the long, once or twice a week segments, and maybe just pump out a couple extra videos per week. Just, some 3 to 5 minute quick hit clips on just some pertinent topics that, whether it be breaking news or just something that I feel that needs to be said, anything like that. So, yeah, we'll see what I decide, but appreciate y'all watching. Thanks for hanging in there with me for this long. Hope you have a great weekend. I hope you enjoy all the matchups this week, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys next week, and I'm looking forward to hearing back, some feedback, and we're approaching the 100 subscribers mark. So if you haven't subscribed, if you like what you're hearing, I would really appreciate a thumbs up in the like column, and then if you don't mind, toss me a subscription, because we're gonna keep pumping these videos out. Like I said, episode 16, I'm not stopping anytime soon. Gonna keep bringing the content to you guys. So if If you like what you see, toss a sub my way, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Deuces.